They said she was a warlord. Part 1, the colony ship. New dawn drifted through the black of space like a sleeping giant. Inside its metal belly, 12,000 humans dreamed of their new home. Families packed into cryopods, children frozen mid-smile, all of them trusting that they would wake up on New Sol Station in 3 months. They had paid everything they owned for this journey. Everything for a chance at a better life. They would never make it. 6 warships appeared from the dark like sharks smelling blood. They were Varanth ships, angular and cruel, covered in weapons that could turn a planet to glass. The ships formed a circle around the new dawn, trapping it like a fish in a net. On the bridge of the colony ship, Captain Hayes watched his screens go red with warnings. His hands shook as he reached for the communications console. "This is the human vessel New Dawn," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We are a civilian transport. We carry no weapons. We mean no harm." The response came immediately. A face filled the screen, reptilian and cold. Admiral Thex of the Varanth Collective looked at Hayes the way a man might look at an insect. "Your vessel will cut engines. Your passengers will be transferred to our ships for processing. You will comply." Hayes felt his stomach drop. Processing. Everyone in space knew what that meant. The Varanth would take the humans, put them to work in their mines, their factories, their war machines. They would work until they died, and no one would ever know what happened to them. "We're protected by Earth treaties," Hayes said desperately. "You can't— Your Earth is far away," Thex interrupted. "Your treaties are words on paper. We are here. You are here. And you are alone." The screen went dark. Hayes slumped in his chair. They were 3 weeks from any human outpost. By the time anyone noticed they were missing, it would be too late. He looked at his crew, saw the fear in their eyes. 12,000 people. 12,000 lives that depended on him, and he had no idea what to do. Then the communications officer gasped. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission." It's the Indomitable." Every person on the bridge went still. The Indomitable. Everyone knew that name. Everyone knew who commanded it. "Put it through," Hayes whispered. The screen flickered to life. A woman appeared, dressed in a black military uniform with silver stars on her collar. She was younger than Hayes expected, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back tight and a scar that ran from her left eyebrow to her cheek. But it was her eyes that made Hayes catch his breath. They were cold and sharp like chips of black ice. Commander Han Jiwoo looked directly at Hayes. "Captain, move your ship 3,000 kilometers to starboard." "Do it now." Hayes didn't hesitate. "Helm, you heard her. Move us." The New Dawn fired its thrusters, slowly drifting away from the Varanth ships. On the enemy vessels, Admiral Thex was receiving his own transmission. Han Jiwoo's face appeared on every screen in his fleet. "This is Commander Han Jiwoo of the United Human Space Fleet," she said. Her voice was flat, emotionless, like she was reading a grocery list. "You are holding human civilians without cause. Release them in 10 minutes. This is not a negotiation." Thex laughed. Around him, his bridge crew joined in. The humans had sent one woman to threaten them. The Varanth had 6 warships, each one larger and more powerful than anything the humans could build. "This commander must be insane." "Little human," Thex said, still chuckling. "You come to my territory and make demands. Perhaps I will add your ship to my collection as well." 9 minutes, Jiwoo said, and the screen went dark. Thex's laughter died. He checked his sensors. The Indomitable was there, just at the edge of scanning range, along with 2 other human vessels. 3 ships against 6. The odds were almost insulting. "Ready all weapons," Thex ordered. "Target the human warships. Let's show them what happens when they threaten the Varanth Collective." His weapons officer worked frantically at his console, then stopped. "Admiral, I can't get a target lock. The human ships they're gone." "What do you mean gone?" "They're not on sensors anymore. It's like they just vanished." Thex felt something cold crawl up his spine. Ships didn't just vanish. He opened his mouth to give another order when his screens flickered. 8 minutes had passed. The lights on his bridge dimmed for just a moment. Then they came back. Everything seemed normal. "Status report," Thex demanded. "All systems normal, Admiral," his tactical officer replied. But the officer's voice was uncertain. 7 minutes passed. Then 6. Thex kept scanning for the human ships, but they were ghosts. How could 3 vessels simply disappear? What technology did the humans have that the Varanth didn't know about? 5 minutes. 4. Thex was sweating now, though he would never admit it to his crew. He had fought in 30 battles. He had crushed rebellions, destroyed pirate fleets, made entire sectors bow to Varenth power. But something about this human woman's voice, that flat certainty, made him feel like he was missing something important. 3 minutes. 2. Admiral, his engineer called out, voice rising in panic. I'm detecting anomalies in our power systems. All 6 ships. It's like something is embedded in our networks, but I can't find it. I can't. 1 minute. Thex made his decision. Open a channel to the human colony ship. Tell them. Every screen on every ship in the Varenth fleet went black at the same moment. The lights died. Gravity failed. Life support stopped. Weapons went cold. Engines shut down. In the space of a single heartbeat, 6 of the most powerful warships in the sector became nothing more than floating metal coffins. Emergency power kicked in 30 seconds later, bathing the bridges in red light. Thex grabbed his command chair to keep from floating away in the zero gravity. His crew was shouting, panicking, scrambling to understand what had happened. Then Han Jiwoo's face appeared on every screen again. She looked exactly the same as before, calm and cold. 10 minutes, she said quietly. You're still alive? Consider that mercy. The power came back slowly. Gravity returned. Systems rebooted one by one. But Thex understood now. The humans hadn't attacked them. They had simply shown what they could do. Those ships had been in their systems the whole time, invisible, waiting. They could have destroyed the entire fleet. They could have left the Varenth floating in the void to die, but they hadn't. Release the colony ship, Thex said, his voice hollow. Release it now. The New Dawn continued toward New Sol Station without further incident. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Han Jiwoo watched the Varenth ships retreat. Her crew was celebrating around her, but she felt no joy, only tired relief that she hadn't needed to kill anyone today. Ma'am, Lieutenant Choi Do-hyun said, approaching carefully. The Varenth are filing a formal complaint with the Galactic Assembly. They're calling it an act of terrorism. Jiwoo nodded slowly. She had expected this. Noted. They're demanding you stand trial. Also noted. Do-hyun hesitated. Permission to speak freely? You just made enemies of an entire species. Jiwoo turned to look at him. That scar on her face pulled tight when she almost smiled. Better to be an enemy they fear than a friend they test. She looked back at the stars, at the endless dark that held both wonder and horror. Somewhere out there, 12,000 humans were still alive because she had been willing to become the monster that scared other monsters. They call me a warlord, she said quietly. Let them. As long as they think twice before touching what's ours. The Indomitable turned and slipped back into the dark, vanishing as completely as it had appeared. And across 3 sectors of space, the story began to spread. The story of the human commander who had stopped a war without firing a single shot. The woman who showed mercy only to prove how easily she could have chosen otherwise. The Reaper of Andros had struck again. They said she was a warlord. Part 2 Ambassador Park Min-ho had never been so angry in his entire diplomatic career. He stood in the Earth Council chamber, surrounded by politicians and military advisors, all of them shouting at once. The holographic displays showed news feeds from across the galaxy. Every single one was talking about Commander Han Jiwoo. She's made us look like warmongers. Senator Williams slammed his fist on the table. We've spent 20 years building peaceful relations with the Varenth Collective, and she destroys it all in 10 minutes. She saved 12,000 civilians, General Ortega countered. Or do we just ignore that part? She threatened an entire fleet. She invaded their computer systems without declaring war. The Varenth are calling for her head, and half the Galactic Assembly agrees with them. Minho listened to them argue, feeling a headache building behind his eyes. He had worked his whole life for this position. Ambassador to the Galactic Assembly. The youngest person ever appointed to the role. He believed in diplomacy, in showing the other species that humanity could be civilized, rational, peaceful. And then Han Jiwoo had to go and prove how dangerous humans could be. Enough, Minho said quietly. The room fell silent. Everyone looked at him. What does the Assembly want? The Secretary General pulled up a document, her face grim. They want Commander Han to stand trial at Kepler 442 station. They want her to answer for what they're calling unprovoked aggression and technological terrorism. If we refuse, they'll vote to expel humanity from the Council. And if we comply? Minho asked. Then we throw one of our best commanders to the wolves and hope they're satisfied. Minho closed his eyes. This was impossible. If they protected Jiwoo, humanity would be isolated, cut off from galactic trade and protection. But if they sacrificed her, what message did that send? That Earth would abandon its own people to please aliens? I'll go talk to her, Minho said finally. I'll convince her to attend the trial voluntarily. If she cooperates, maybe we can control the narrative. General Ortega snorted. Good luck with that. Han Jiwoo doesn't cooperate with anyone. 3 days later, Minho's shuttle approached Forward Operating Base Taejin, a military station on the edge of human space. The base was small, functional, built for war rather than comfort. As he walked through the corridors, soldiers stopped and saluted. They all had the same look in their eyes. Respect mixed with something close to worship. These people would die for Han Jiwoo without hesitation. He found her in her office, a small gray room with nothing personal in it. No photos, no decorations, just tactical displays and star charts. She sat behind her desk reading reports on a datapad. She didn't look up when he entered. Ambassador Park, she said, you're here to bring me in. How did you? Because that's what politicians do when soldiers make them look bad. She finally looked up at him. Those cold eyes pinned him in place. You think I made the wrong call? Minho sat down across from her without being invited. I think you had options besides threatening an entire fleet. Really? What options? She set down her datapad. Should I have negotiated? Asked them nicely to please not enslave 12,000 humans? Maybe offered them trade concessions or territory. You could have called for backup, waited for a full battle group. By the time a battle group arrived, those civilians would have been scattered across Varanth space. We would never have found them. Jiwoo leaned back in her chair. You want to know why I did what I did, Ambassador? Because the Varanth needed to learn a lesson. So does every other species that thinks humans are easy targets. And what lesson is that? That it costs less to leave us alone than to test us. Minho shook his head. You can't base diplomacy on fear. I'm not a diplomat. I'm a soldier. My job is to keep humans alive. She pulled up a file on her desk display. This is the Vrin mining accident from 2339. They said it was a mistake when their automated systems destroyed Jeju Station. 40,000 dead. My mother, my father, my little brother. All of them gone because the Vrin wanted the minerals in our asteroid field and didn't care if we were in the way. She pulled up another file. The Kalashi blockade of 2341. They wanted Earth to hand over our jump gate technology. When we refused, they blockaded our home system for 6 months. 300,000 people starved before they got bored and left. File after file appeared on the screen. Incidents, attacks, murders, all of them dismissed as accidents or misunderstandings. All of them unpunished. You see peace, Ambassador. I see a pattern. Every species in the galaxy has tested humanity. They poke at us, hurt us, kill us, all to see what we'll do. And for 20 years we've smiled and asked them to please stop. Jiwoo's voice was ice. I'm done asking. Minho looked at the files, feeling sick. He knew about these incidents, of course. But seeing them all together like this, seeing the numbers. There are other ways. Name one that works. The Assembly. The Assembly is a joke. They only respect power, so I showed them power. Jiwoo stood up. But you didn't come here to debate philosophy. You came here to convince me to go to Kepler 442, so let's not waste time. I'll go, Minho blinked. Just like that? Just like that. On one condition. She walked to the window looking out at the stars. I go on my terms. I choose my ship, my crew, and I give the testimony I want to give. No scripts written by politicians. No apologies. The council wants you to show remorse. I have none. Then they'll crucify you. Jiwoo turned back to him, and for the first time Minho saw something other than cold calculation in her eyes. He saw exhaustion. The weight of all those deaths, all those decisions pressing down on her shoulders. Let them try, she said quietly. Better they hate me than underestimate humanity. Over the next few days, Minho watched Jiwoo prepare. He met her crew, the people who served under her with absolute loyalty. Lieutenant Choi Do-hyun, her tactical officer, was a young man who spoke about Jiwoo like she was a hero from ancient legends. Dr. Kim Nari, the ship's chief medical officer, was the only person who could make Jiwoo laugh. And engineer Lee Sun-ho kept the Indomitable running with spare parts and genius. They were a family, Minho realized. A strange military family that had seen too much combat and lost too many friends. One evening, he found Dr. Kim in the medical bay, running diagnostics. She looked up when he entered, her expression wary. "Ambassador, what can I do for you?" "I'm trying to understand something," Minho said. "Everyone on this ship treats Commander Han like she's some kind of savior. But the galaxy sees her as a monster. Which one is true?" Kim was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "5 years ago I was stationed on a colony called New Busan. The Kalashi came, said they wanted to establish a trade post. We said yes. Why wouldn't we? Then more ships came. They brought weapons. They started taking over." She turned back to her equipment, but Minho could see her hands shaking. The governor called for help. Commander Han arrived with one ship, against a Kalashi occupation force. Everyone thought she was insane. What happened? She walked into the Kalashi command center alone. She sat down with their war leader and played a game of strategy with him. If she won, they left. If she lost, she would surrender her ship. That's insane. That's Jiwoo. Kim smiled slightly. She won. The Kalashi left without firing a shot. Before they jumped away, their war leader sent her a message. He said she was the most dangerous human he'd ever met, because she knew exactly how much violence she was capable of, and chose not to use it unless necessary. So she's not a monster. She's something scarier than a monster, Ambassador. She's someone who has become exactly what she needs to be to keep us alive. And she carries that burden so the rest of us don't have to. The day came to depart for Kepler 442 station. The Indomitable undocked from forward operating base Taejin, its black hull sliding through the void like a knife. Minho stood on the bridge watching the crew work with practiced efficiency. Jiwoo sat in her command chair, reviewing documents on a datapad. She looked calm, but Minho noticed how her jaw was clenched, how her fingers tapped against the armrest in a nervous rhythm. "Commander," he said quietly, "are you afraid?" She didn't look at him. "Only fools aren't afraid, Ambassador. But fear is useless unless you do something with it. And what are you going to do?" Finally, she looked at him. That scar pulled tight as she smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had already decided to burn the world down if necessary. "I'm going to tell them the truth, and then we'll see if they're brave enough to hear it." The Indomitable jumped to faster than light speed, carrying Han Jiwoo toward a trial that would determine not just her fate, but the fate of humanity's place in the galaxy. Minho watched the stars streak past and wondered if he had just helped create a disaster or a miracle. With Han Jiwoo, it was often hard to tell the difference. They said she was a warlord. Part 3 Kepler 442 station was the jewel of the galaxy. It floated in neutral space, a massive sphere of metal and glass where 14 different species came together to argue, trade, and pretend they were civilized. The station could house 500,000 beings at once, with different sections adjusted for different atmospheres, gravities, and environmental needs. It was beautiful. It was also a place where humanity had very little power. Han Jiwoo stood at the window of her quarters, looking out at the station as the Indomitable approached. She wore her dress uniform, black with silver stars and ribbons that represented battles most aliens had never heard of. The scar on her face seemed darker in the reflected light. "You look like you're going to a funeral," Dr. Kim Nari said from the doorway. "Maybe I am." Jiwoo turned away from the window. "Mine or theirs, we'll find out. You could still refuse to go. We could jump away right now. And then what? Hide forever? Let Earth take the punishment for my actions?" Jiwoo shook her head. "No, I knew what I was doing when I threatened the Varanth. Time to face the consequences." Ambassador Park Minho joined them, looking nervous in his diplomatic robes. "The assembly convenes in 2 hours. They've already made it clear this won't be a fair trial. Half the species there want to make an example of you. Let them try." They took a shuttle to the station, passing through security checkpoints manned by galactic peacekeepers. The peacekeepers were Vorton, a species that looked like walking crystals. They scanned Jiwoo 3 times, clearly hoping to find a hidden weapon. They found nothing. Jiwoo had come unarmed as required, but as Dr. Kim had once said, Jiwoo herself was the weapon. The assembly chamber was enormous, circular, rising up in tiers like an ancient amphitheater. Each species had their section, marked by their flags and colors. Humans sat in the outer ring, far from the center, a deliberate insult. They were junior members of the Galactic Council, barely tolerated. Thousands of beings filled the chamber. Jiwoo could feel their eyes on her as she walked to the human section. Whispers followed her like smoke. There she is. The Warlord. The terrorist. The human who dared threaten the Varanth Collective. She sat down next to Ambassador Park. Lieutenant Choi Do-yun and Dr. Kim sat behind them. The rest of Earth's diplomatic delegation looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. The Assembly's speaker called the session to order. The speaker was a Lumian, a species that looked like floating jellyfish made of light. Its voice echoed through the chamber in perfect translation, beamed directly into every being's mind. We are gathered to address the unprovoked attack by Commander Han Jiwoo of the human species upon the Varanth Collective. Admiral Thex will present the charges. Thex rose from his seat in the Varanth section. He looked as cruel and reptilian in person as he had on the communication screen. He moved to the center of the chamber where a holographic display activated. Members of the Assembly, Thex began, his voice dripping with false sadness. I come before you seeking justice. Commander Han Jiwoo attacked my fleet without warning, without provocation. She used forbidden technology to infiltrate our systems and disable 6 warships. She threatened to kill thousands of Varanth warriors. The holographic display showed sensor logs from the Varanth ships. It showed the Indomitable appearing, Jiwoo's transmission, and then the sudden system failures. But it didn't show what happened before. It didn't show the colony ship being held hostage. This human, Thex pointed at Jiwoo, represents the worst of her species. Violent, unpredictable, dangerous. If we allow this to go unpunished, what message does that send? That any species can threaten us? That technology can be used as a weapon of terror. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Several species representatives stood up to voice support for the Varanth, the Kalashi, the Vryn, the Horiths, all species that had, at one point or another, tested humanity and found them weak. Ambassador Park stood up, preparing to give his carefully crafted speech. But before he could speak, Jiwoo stood up. The murmurs stopped. Commander Han, the speaker said, surprised. You have not been given permission to address the assembly. I don't need permission. Jiwoo's voice was quiet, but it carried through the entire chamber. You want to judge me? Fine, but you're going to hear the truth first. This is against protocol. Thex started. Jiwoo ignored him. She pulled out a small data chip and held it up. This contains every incident of alien aggression against humanity since first contact. 23 years of attacks, murders, and tests. All of them dismissed as accidents or misunderstandings. She walked down to the center of the chamber. Security moved to stop her, but the speaker waved them off. This was going to be interesting. Jiwoo inserted the chip into the holographic display. Images flooded the chamber. Destroyed stations. Burning ships. Body counts. Reports of humans kidnapped, enslaved, killed. Vryn mining accident 2339, Jiwoo said, her voice flat. 40,000 humans dead. The Vryn said their automated systems malfunctioned. They paid a fine equivalent to the cost of a single mining ship. A new image appeared. Kalashi blockade 2341. 300,000 humans starved while the Kalashi demanded our technology. They got bored and left. No punishment. No consequences, more images, more numbers. Varanth raids on human cargo ships. 14 attacks in 3 years. Ships captured. Crews missing. When we complained to the assembly, we were told there was insufficient evidence. Jiwoo looked up at the tiers of aliens watching her. You want to know why I threatened Admiral Thex? Because he was holding 12,000 civilians hostage. He was going to enslave them, work them to death in his mines, and no one would have stopped him. Lies. Thex roared. We were simply investigating. I have the communication logs. Jiwoo's eyes locked onto Thex like targeting lasers. You told Captain Hayes that his people would be processed, that Earth was far away, that treaties were just words on paper. She turned to the assembly. Should I play the recording? Silence fell over the chamber. Thex's face showed something Jiwoo recognized. Fear. He hadn't known she had recorded everything. Every species in this chamber has tested humanity. Jiwoo continued. You poke at us. You hurt us. You kill us, all to see if we'll fight back. And when we show you mercy, you call it weakness. When we show you strength, you call it terrorism. She walked slowly around the center of the chamber, making eye contact with representatives from a dozen species. You call me a warlord. You want to know what a real warlord would have done? A real warlord would have destroyed those 6 ships, would have left the Varanth fleet floating in space dead and frozen. would have sent a message that humanity doesn't negotiate with hostage takers. But I didn't do that. I disabled their ships. I scared them. And then I let them live. Jiwoo stopped walking. I chose mercy. Not because I'm weak, but because I'm not interested in starting a war humanity doesn't need. Ambassador Park watched in horror and awe as Jiwoo completely destroyed their carefully planned defense strategy. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't showing remorse. She was putting the entire galaxy on trial. You want to expel humanity from this council? Jiwoo asked. Go ahead. But understand what that means. It means the next time someone tests us, there won't be a diplomatic solution. It means we stop showing mercy. It means we become exactly what you're afraid we are. She pulled the data chip from the holographic display. Or you could accept that humanity has been more than patient. That we've followed your rules, respected your laws, and asked nicely for you to stop killing us. And when asking didn't work, we finally showed you why that was a mistake. Jiwoo looked directly at the speaker. I'm not sorry for saving those civilians. I'm not sorry for showing the Varanth that humans aren't easy prey. And if you want to punish me for that, then do it. But know that you're punishing me for being effective, not for being wrong. The chamber erupted. Some species were shouting in outrage. Others were arguing. The human delegation sat in stunned silence. Ambassador Park realized his mouth was hanging open and closed it quickly. Jiwoo walked back to her seat and sat down, as calm as if she had just commented on the weather. Dr. Kim leaned forward and whispered, That was either brilliant or suicidal. Why not both? Jiwoo replied quietly. The speaker called for order, but it took almost 10 minutes to get the chamber under control. Finally, the Lumian's voice cut through the noise. The assembly will recess for deliberation. Commander Han, you will remain on the station until a decision is reached. I'll be in my quarters, Jiwoo said. As they left the chamber, Ambassador Park grabbed Jiwoo's arm. What did you just do? I told the truth. You accused half the galaxy of war crimes. Yes, and now they can't pretend they don't know. Jiwoo pulled her arm free. You wanted to apologize, make nice, hope they'd be gentle. That's not how predators work, Ambassador. You show them your throat, they'll rip it out. You show them your teeth, they think twice. They walked through the corridors of Kepler 442 and Jiwoo noticed something. The other species in the hallways were moving aside. Making room, not out of respect but out of uncertainty. They had expected a monster. Instead, they got someone who had calmly, rationally explained exactly why she had done what she did. Back in her quarters, Jiwoo finally let herself relax. She sat down heavily, feeling the weight of the last few hours. They said she was a warlord. Part 4, the message arrived at 0400 station time. Jiwoo was already awake, staring out at the stars like she did most nights when sleep wouldn't come. Her datapad chimed. She picked it up and read the message twice, making sure she understood. Then she smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. By 0600, Ambassador Park Minho was pounding on her door looking like he hadn't slept at all. Tell me you're going to refuse, he said the moment she let him in. Why would I refuse? Because it's a trap. Trial by champion is an ancient law. The Varanth are trying to turn this into a physical contest because they know they can't beat you with words. Jiwoo poured herself coffee, offered him a cup. He shook his head impatiently. Admiral Thex has invoked a law that hasn't been used in over a century, she said calmly. 3 stages. Strategy, combat, and survival. Winner takes all. The loser species accepts the judgment of the victor. Exactly. And Thex is sending Commander Vrax. Do you know who that is? I looked him up. 12 wins in trial by champion. Veteran of 30 campaigns. Enhanced with military-grade cybernetics. Trained in 17 different combat systems. Jiwoo took a sip of coffee. Sounds dangerous. Sounds impossible. You can't beat him, Jiwoo. No one can. Maybe. She set down her cup. Or maybe everyone assumes he's unbeatable, so they lose before they even start. This isn't about pride. No, it's about finishing what I started. Jiwoo turned to face him fully. I humiliated Thex in front of the entire galaxy. If I refuse this challenge, it proves I'm just talk. But if I accept and win, then humanity is declared right. The Assembly has to acknowledge that we were justified in defending our people. And if you lose, then Earth publicly accepts blame for my actions and pays reparations to the Varanth. Jiwoo shrugged. But I won't lose. Park stared at her. You can't possibly know that. I know I'm the best chance humanity has. If not me, then who? She walked past him. I need to prepare. The trial begins tomorrow. The news spread through the station like fire. Trial by champion. The human commander who had threatened the Varanth fleet would now face their greatest warrior in single combat. Betting pools opened across the galaxy. The odds were not in Jiwoo's favor. Dr. Kim Nari found Jiwoo in the station's training center, running combat simulations. She watched for a moment as Jiwoo fought against holographic opponents, moving with the efficiency of someone who had been in too many real fights. You're going to get yourself killed, Kim said when Jiwoo paused for water. Probably not. That's not reassuring. It's not supposed to be. Jiwoo wiped sweat from her face. Run the simulation again. Increase difficulty. Kim sighed and adjusted the controls. Do-hyun wants to go with you. He's ready to volunteer as your second. No, this is my fight. You don't have to do everything alone, you know. Jiwoo was quiet for a moment, watching the holographic enemies reset. Yes, I do. Because if I fail, I need you all here to pick up the pieces. The simulation started again. Kim watched Jiwoo fight and realized something. Her commander wasn't training to win. She was training to survive long enough to make it count. Engineer Lee Sunho showed up that evening with a case of equipment. I've been studying the rules, he said, spreading out various devices on the table. They scan for weapons, but there's nothing that says your equipment can't have multiple uses. He showed her a communications device that could also emit electromagnetic pulses, a water filtration unit that could be reprogrammed as a sensor array, a medical scanner that could detect life signs through walls. It's all technically legal, Sunho said with a grin. Just creative. Jiwoo examined each piece carefully. You're a genius, I know. Try to come back alive so I can say I told you so. The next morning, Jiwoo stood on a shuttle heading to the trial location. The Galactic Assembly had chosen a neutral moon, harsh and barely habitable. Perfect for testing survival skills. Lieutenant Choi Do-hyun sat across from her, his face tight with worry. Permission to speak freely, ma'am? Always. This is insane. You're walking into a fight against someone who's literally designed to kill. So am I, Jiwoo said quietly. I just hide it better. The moon's surface was rocky and gray with a thin atmosphere that required breathing masks. A massive amphitheater had been constructed for spectators. Millions more would watch via holofeed across the galaxy. This wasn't just a trial. It was entertainment. Jiwoo stepped off the shuttle in her combat gear. Black and silver lightweight armor that wouldn't slow her down. No weapons. Just her mind, and whatever she could improvise. Commander Vrax was waiting at the other end of the arena. He was massive, nearly 7 feet tall, with scales that looked like they could deflect bullets. His cybernetic enhancements glowed with power. He looked at Jiwoo the way a predator looks at prey. The speaker's voice echoed across the arena, transmitted directly into everyone's minds. The trial by champion will proceed in 3 stages. First, strategy. Second, combat. Third, survival. The warrior who prevails in 2 of 3 stages will claim victory for their species. Vrax and Jiwoo were led to separate stations for the first stage. Holographic displays appeared before them, showing a simulated space battle. Each commander controlled a small fleet. The objective was simple: destroy the enemy's flagship. The simulation began. Vrax played exactly as Jiwoo expected: aggressive, overwhelming force. He sent his fleet charging forward in a hammer blow, trying to smash through her defenses. Jiwoo did the opposite. She scattered her fleet, making them look disorganized and panicked. Vrax's forces chased them, splitting up to pursue multiple targets. What he didn't realize was that Jiwoo's ships were leading him into a trap. She had seeded the battlefield with stealth mines, invisible to sensors. As Vrax's fleet spread out, they hit the mines one by one. Explosions rippled through his formations. While he was reeling, Jiwoo's scattered fleet regrouped and hit his flagship from 3 sides at once. The simulation ended with Vrax's command ship exploding. Stage 1, Han Jiwoo. The crowd was silent. No one had expected her to win the strategy phase. Vrax's face showed something between shock and rage. The second stage began immediately. Hand-to-hand combat in a kinetic, dampening field. No ranged weapons. No projectiles. Just pure fighting skill. They entered the field from opposite sides. Vrax charged like a bull, his enhanced muscles letting him move faster than something his size should. His first punch would have shattered concrete. Jiwoo wasn't there when it landed. She moved like water flowing around his attacks. She had fought bigger opponents before. You couldn't overpower them. You had to be smarter, faster, more patient. Vrax chased her around the arena, throwing devastating strikes that Jiwoo dodged by inches. The crowd was shouting now, caught up in the violence. Ambassador Park watched through his fingers, unable to look away. Jiwoo let Vrax tire himself out. Let him get frustrated. Then she struck. She went for his joints, the places where even cybernetic enhancements needed flexibility. A kick to his knee, an elbow to his neck, a palm strike to his enhanced spine that made his whole body seize up. Vrax roared and caught her with a backhand that sent her flying. Jiwoo hit the ground hard, tasted blood. Her ribs screamed, but she got up. Always get up. The fight continued for 20 brutal minutes. Jiwoo was smaller, weaker, but she was relentless. She targeted the same points over and over, until Vrax's movements became sluggish, until his cybernetic enhancements started glitching from the damage. Finally, she got behind him and locked his arm in a joint lock that would break it if he moved wrong. Yield, she said quietly, breathing hard. Or I break it. Vrax tried to power through. His enhancements screamed, but physics was physics and Jiwoo had the leverage. Yield, she said again. Vrax's voice was a growl. I yield, stage 2, Jiwoo, the crowd erupted. She had done it. She had won the trial. But the third stage was still scheduled, and Jiwoo knew something important. Vrax's pride was shattered. That made him more dangerous, not less. They were given 6 hours to rest before the survival stage. Jiwoo sat in her holding area, Dr. Kim treating her injuries. 3 cracked ribs, bruised shoulder, split lip, nothing that would stop her. You won, Kim said. You can forfeit the last stage. You've already beaten him 2-1. No, he needs to see it through. Jiwoo winced as Kim wrapped her ribs. If I stop now, he'll always wonder if he could have won. So this is about his feelings? This is about making sure the Varanth never test us again. The third stage was simple in concept, brutal in execution. Both warriors were dropped into hostile terrain 100 kilometers apart. They had to reach an extraction point. The environment was designed to kill. Toxic air, predatory fauna, seismic instability. Most contestants tried to avoid each other and just survive. But Jiwoo knew Vrax wouldn't do that. He needed to prove himself. He would come for her. She moved through the wasteland like a ghost, using every survival trick she had learned growing up on colony stations. She filtered water from toxic pools. She avoided the territory of the native predators. She used Sunho's modified equipment to stay one step ahead. Behind her, she could sense Vrax getting closer. He was tracking her, pushing himself to the limit. Then the ground shook. A volcanic fissure opened right in front of Vrax, swallowing him into toxic fumes. His suit was damaged. His breathing mask cracked. Jiwoo heard his distress signal. They said she was a warlord. Part 5. The medical bay on Kepler 442 station was chaos. Doctors rushed around, treating both warriors who had just completed the trial by Champion. Commander Vrax lay on one bed, his cybernetic systems being repaired and his lungs cleared of toxic fumes. On the other bed, Jiwoo sat while Dr. Kim Nari worked on her cracked ribs. Hold still, Kim muttered, running a bone-knitting device over Jiwoo's chest. You're lucky these didn't puncture anything important. Luck had nothing to do with it, Jiwoo replied quietly. She was watching Vrax across the room. The Varanth warrior was conscious now, staring at the ceiling with an expression she couldn't quite read. Ambassador Park Minho burst into the medical bay, followed by Lieutenant Choi Do-hyun and Engineer Lee Soon-ho. Park looked like he had aged 10 years in the past day. The assembly is convening in 1 hour, Park said, breathless. They're going to deliver their ruling. The entire galaxy is watching. Let them watch, Jiwoo said. You saved him. Park shook his head, still unable to believe it. You could have won by default. You could have left him to die. Why didn't you? Because that's not who we are. Jiwoo stood up slowly, testing her ribs. They hurt, but she could move. The galaxy thinks humans are monsters or weaklings. I wanted to show them we're neither. We're just people trying to survive. Across the medical bay, Vrax sat up. His scales were dulled from the ordeal, but his eyes were clear. He looked at Jiwoo for a long moment, then stood and walked over. The humans tensed, but Vrax simply bowed his head. "You spared my life," he said in his deep, rumbling voice. "In my culture, that creates a debt that cannot be repaid with words." "I don't want payment," Jiwoo replied. "I just want the Varanth to understand that we're not your enemies unless you make us your enemies." Vrax was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised everyone. "I have fought in 12 trials by champion. I have never lost. But I have also never fought someone who won by choosing not to kill." He looked at her with something close to respect. "You are the most dangerous warrior I've ever faced. Not because of your strength, but because you know when not to use it. That's what makes us human," Jiwoo said simply. The Galactic Assembly Chamber was packed. Every seat was filled. Every species wanted to see how this would end. Han Jiwoo walked to the human section in her dress uniform, freshly cleaned despite the bruises still visible on her face. The scar on her cheek seemed more prominent than ever. The whispers followed her like they always did. But this time, they were different. Not just fear or anger, something else, uncertainty, maybe even a hint of respect. Admiral Thek sat in the Varanth section, looking like he had swallowed something bitter. Commander Vrax sat beside him, his face unreadable. The speaker called the assembly to order. The Lumian's light pulsed as its voice filled everyone's mind. "The trial by champion has concluded. Commander Han Jiwoo of humanity has prevailed in all 3 stages. According to ancient law, the Varanth Collective must accept the judgment of the victor." Murmurs filled the chamber. Thex looked like he wanted to object, but Vrax placed a hand on his shoulder. The gesture was clear. "Accept it." Furthermore, the speaker continued, "This assembly must address the evidence presented by Commander Han. Evidence of repeated aggression against humanity by multiple species over a period of 23 years. Now the chamber erupted, species shouting at each other, accusations flying, the careful diplomatic peace of the assembly cracking like thin ice. The speaker's light flared brighter, demanding silence. "The Galactic Council has deliberated. We have reviewed the data. We have examined the logs, and we can no longer dismiss these incidents as accidents." Ambassador Park gripped the armrest of his chair so hard his knuckles turned white. This was it. The moment that would define humanity's future in the galaxy. Therefore, the Council issues the following ruling. The Varanth Collective will pay reparations to humanity for unprovoked attacks on civilian vessels. Other species found guilty of similar actions will face investigation. Thex shot to his feet. "This is an outrage. You cannot—" "It is done, Admiral." The speaker's voice was final. "Furthermore, humanity is granted full Council member status, with all rights and protections thereof. No longer will humans be considered junior members. No longer will attacks on human vessels be dismissed without consequence." The chamber fell silent. Park felt tears in his eyes. Full Council membership. It was what Earth had been working toward for 2 decades. And Jiwoo had achieved it by refusing to back down. "However," the speaker continued, "this assembly must also address Commander Han Jiwoo directly." Jiwoo stood, her face expressionless. "You have proven yourself a formidable warrior. You have also proven yourself capable of mercy when others would choose violence. The galaxy has learned much from watching you these past days." The speaker paused. "But understand this. The eyes of the galaxy are now on humanity. You have shown us what humans are capable of. You have earned respect through strength and wisdom. Do not make us regret granting you this status. We won't," Jiwoo said simply. "As long as you remember that we defend our own, always." The speaker's light pulsed in what might have been approval. "Then this assembly is adjourned." The chamber erupted again, but this time it was different. Species were arguing, yes, but they were also talking, really talking for the first time in years. The comfortable lies had been stripped away. Now they had to deal with uncomfortable truths. Jiwoo walked out of the chamber with her crew. In the hallway, she was stopped by a group of ambassadors from smaller species. The Deltan representative, a small crystalline being, approached cautiously. Commander Han, the Deltan said in its chiming voice. My people have also faced aggression from larger species. We were too afraid to speak up. Thank you for having the courage we lacked. More ambassadors came forward. The Pilthian, the Novar, the Westry. All of them species that had been bullied, tested, and dismissed by the larger powers. All of them finding their voice because one human had refused to be silent. Jiwoo accepted. Their thanks with grace, but inside she felt exhausted. She had won, yes. But the cost was visible in every bruise, every cracked rib, every sleepless night that would follow. Later, on the Indomitable, as they prepared to depart Kepler 442 station, Jiwoo stood in her usual spot. The observation deck. Looking at the stars, Dr. Kim Nari found her there, as she often did. They're calling you a hero now, Kim said, standing beside her. Not a warlord. They can call me whatever they want, Jiwoo replied, as long as they think twice before testing us again. Did you ever think it would work? Your plan? No plan survives contact with the enemy. I just knew I had to do something. Jiwoo touched the window, her fingers tracing constellations. How many humans died before I took command, Nari? How many colony ships were lost? How many stations destroyed? All because we were trying to be nice, trying to prove we were civilized. And now? Now they know. We're not conquerors. We're not saints. We're survivors. And that's more dangerous than either extreme. Lieutenant Choi Do-hyun's voice came over the intercom. Commander, we're cleared for departure. Take us home, Lieutenant. The Indomitable pulled away from Kepler 442 station, its black hull sliding through the void like a shadow. Behind them, the galaxy would spend months debating what had happened. Some would call Jiwoo a hero. Others would still call her a warlord. But all of them would remember. On the station, Commander Vrax watched the human ship depart. Admiral Thek stood beside him, still angry about the humiliation. She made us look weak, Thex growled. No, Vrax replied. She showed us what weakness really looks like. We thought humans were prey because they asked for peace, but prey doesn't spare predators. Prey runs or dies. He turned to his admiral. Han Jiwoo gave me back my life when she could have let me die. That's not weakness. That's something scarier. That's restraint. It means she calculated that I was worth more alive than dead. So what does that make her? Vrax thought about the human woman who had beaten him in strategy, fought him to a standstill, and then saved his life. That makes her exactly what they call her, a warlord, but not the kind we understand. She doesn't conquer territory, she conquers perception. Back on Earth, in the government chambers, politicians were celebrating. Full council membership, reparations from the Varanth, new alliances with smaller species. It was a diplomatic victory beyond their wildest dreams. But they all knew the truth. They hadn't achieved this through careful negotiation or clever treaties. They had achieved it because one woman had been willing to become the monster that scared other monsters, and then shown mercy when she could have shown cruelty. Weeks later, Han Jiwoo stood in her quarters on the Indomitable, reading a message that had just arrived. It was from the colony ship New Dawn, the civilians she had saved from the Varanth. Thank you, it said simply. Our children are safe because of you. We named our first settlement after you, Jiwoo Station, so future generations remember that someone fought for them when no one else would. She read the message 3 times, then deleted it. She didn't need monuments or honors. She just needed to know that the people she protected were alive. Dr. Kim found her later, sitting in the observation deck as always. You okay? Kim asked. Define okay. Fair point. Kim sat down beside her,